For you, we open Jerusalem. We wouldn't close Jerusalem. Can you imagine Jerusalem being closed? No. But we're here to talk about the events of Tevet. And as Ashkenazim say in the Slichot, there were 3 days of darkness in Tevet. On the 8th day, the completion of the Septuagint, the Torah was translated into Greek by 72 sages in Egypt. And that gave control of God's Torah, which was given to Yisrael, to the whole world. There was a purpose in that. It had to happen, but it was darkness. On the 9th day of Tevet, both Ezra and Nehemiah passed away. These great lights that had brought about the rebuilding in the time of the Second Temple, those lights were dimmed. And then it's incredible that we're standing here, because look what it says here. B'yom asara b'tevet hatafshin lamed. In the 10th of Tevet, on 5730, there was a completion of fixing the walls of Jerusalem. We're after the 6-day war, and now the walls of Jerusalem are fixed. And the verse from Ezra Nehemiah, V'alta arucha lechomat Yerushalayim, and the walls of Jerusalem were healed. And this is perfect for talking about Asara b'Tevet.
But wait a minute, Rabbi. Are these walls from the events of the 10th of Tevet?
No. These are not from the time of the events of the 10th of Tevet.
So can we see something that does date from back then?
Okay. Okay. I hope you're all familiar with the street. You come in from Jaffa Gate, you're walking down the street, and now you're going to continue down to the Kotel. But actually, this is a major intersection from the time of the Second Temple and on. This is the road that's going out to Damascus Gate, and then this way turns to Zion Gate. And many people don't realize that the Cardo is here and that the Jewish quarter is just inside over here. So we're going to turn in and walk on the ancient Cardo and then go below it. We're walking on a street that's about 1,600 years old. The archaeologists marked with black lines where walls from the time of the Hasmoneans, from the time of the Maccabees, are running below us. Apparently there was a gate here. Then, here again, we have a Hasmonean Wall. But it meets a much earlier wall. My right foot is standing on the black stone, which means it's standing on a Hasmonean Wall. My left foot is standing on these pinkish stones. My right hand is over a Hasmonean Wall. My left hand is over a wall from the time of the First Temple. And this wall connects to the Israelite Tower and connects to walls of Jerusalem, the fortifications from the time of the First Temple. So actually, this is outside of the First Temple period wall. And now we're walking on the First Temple period wall. And now I'm definitely inside the city from the time of the First Temple. Was this the outermost wall or one of a series of walls? That's a discussion. Now, you're in the Cardo, you're in the modern market that's rebuilt into the Byzantine streets, into the shops. Everybody knows this section over here. Let's go to the lesser known. So now the well-known part of the Cardo is above us, and here's a Hasmonean Wall about 2,100 years old, which, as you've seen in other World Mizrahi videos, is often built over First Temple period fortifications. And here indeed we have walls and a fortification from the time of the First Temple. Now archaeologists give each wall a number to track it. And I'd like to draw your attention to wall 4215, which is running into other walls all around. And these are fortifications from the time of the first temple. It's assumed that they are city walls. And so now we should be in light of a story. As it says in Kings 2, chapter 25, Vayhi b'shnat ha'tshi'it l'malcho, in the 9th rule of Tzedekah, in the 10th month, on the 10th of the month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, comes, he and his army in Yerushalayim. They camp against it, and they build up an attack system, a dike around it, siege walls around it. And the city sat in siege until the 11th year of King Tzidkiyahu. And then we get to the break-in of the walls, which here it says the 9th of Tammuz. Was that the 9th? Was it the 17th? That's discussed elsewhere. So realize what has happened here. Since the time of the first temple, Jerusalem under siege? Yes. Sennacherib attacks Chizkiyahu HaMelech and surrounds his city. We're in the middle of a battle. But it's not a prolonged siege. Now, I have to tell you I have a problem, because the archaeological report, when I read it now, clearly says this is from the 8th to 7th century before Common Era. And that puts it in Chizkiyahu's time. It's not, in archaeological terms, the 6th century before Common Era, which would be the time of the Babylonian attack against Tzidkiyahu in the time of Yirmiyahu. And indeed, the archaeologists say, despite not having found direct evidence in the finds from Area X2, which is where we are, we believe that the fortifications went out of use with the destruction of the city by the Babylonians in 587-6 BCE, and then remains were reincorporated by the Hasmoneans. There's a possibility that these walls are from Chizkiyahu's time and that they're not from the time of Asar v'Tevet of the Babylonian siege. They had gone out of use and are not the outside walls.
So, Rabbi, are you telling us that these are not, in fact, the original walls from the events of the 10th of Tevet?
Maybe not.
So, when are we going to see the actual thing?
You want to go to a place that's more certain. Okay, let's go. This is the corner of the Herodian southern wall of the Temple Mount and the Herodian eastern wall of the Temple Mount. In fact, that window up there is an Herodian room. It's from the time of the Second Temple. But we want to focus on the Babylonian siege in the time of the First Temple, and we're going to walk along the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. As we've discussed in other World Mizrahi videos for Tisha B'Av, the first part is Herodian, the next part is Hasmonean, and then comes the Temple Mount wall from the time of the First Temple, from Beit Rishon. This gate is called the Golden Gate or Shari Rachamim. And there are some opinions that it is the Eastern Gate, which was the front door to the Temple Mount. If so, the temple did not stand by the Dome of the Rock, but rather facing us here. Lynn Rittmeyer, the architect who excavated together with the archaeologists in the 60s and the 70s, shows posts that were identified on either side of the gate below in the ground, so that he says it's definitely a First Temple period gate. My focus now is not the eastern wall of the Har HaBayit of the Temple Mount, but the city wall of Jerusalem. Charles Warren, excavating in the 1800s and the 1860s, could not go directly onto the Temple Mount. So he made all types of underground digs. And here, because he wants to come under and understand the ancient gate, and he gets blocked by a massive wall, which makes this spot the perfect place to talk about Asara B'Tevet. Yirmiyahu writes in the book of Kings that we read before about the steps in the destruction of the temple. Yecheskel has gone into exile with Yechaniah 11 years before the destruction and is speaking to the people in Bavel. In chapter 24, Vayidvar Hashem Elai in the 9th year, in the 10th month, on the 10th of the month, saying, that's Asara B'Tevet, Ben Adam, Ktov Lacha et Shem Hayom, write down the name of the day. As the Mefarshim say, we don't have names for the days there. It means which day of the week relative to Shabbat. At Etzem Hayom Hazeh, this very day. Samach Melech Bavel Yerushalayim B'Etzem Hayom Hazeh, because the king of Babylon has besieged with his walls the city of Yerushalayim on this very day. Later on, when they get the news, they'll now know you're telling the truth. And I'm going to cook this city because I can't get all the rot and the defilement out of it without cooking this out. And this siege now lasts for several years. Now, it says twice in this pasuk, Etzem Hayom Hazeh. And it's brought in halacha. I'm quoting from the review of yeshiva.org.il. It's brought in halacha that the Beit Yosef paskins like the Avudraham, that were we to not have our calendar, were the 10th of Tevet to come out on Shabbat, we would fast on Shabbat. It can't be pushed off. The kasha is brought from Rashi and Megillah, that just like the Korban Ha'etzim was pushed off if it came out on Shabbat, so too Asara B'Tevet would come off. But the Avudraham says it wouldn't be pushed off. And the Grach explains, according to the Minchas Chinuch, because we have the fast days mentioned in the Pasuk in Zechariah by months. Tzom HaRevi'i, the fast of the 4th month, the 17th of Tammuz. Tzom HaChamishi of Tisha B'Av. And we are now discussing that Tzom HaShvi'i is Tzom Gedalia. We are in Tzom HaAsiri in the 10th month of the year in Tevet. So that's the months. And as long as you have the fast day during the month, that's okay. But here it repeats, Etzem Hayom Hazeh, and therefore it has to be this very day. It's immovable. I have to understand why. It's fitting in halacha that even when the Asara B'Tevet comes out on Friday, and there's a halacha that you should not come into Shabbat worn, yet when Asara B'Tevet comes on Friday, we fast until Shabbat begins, and then we end the fast as we make Kiddush. We don't push it off from a Friday. Now, why is this an appropriate place? Because Lean Rittmeyer shows that we are here approximately above Warren's Wall. And here is his reconstruction of the eastern wall of the city in the time of Nehemiah, exactly where it was in the time of the first temple, which makes this the perfect place to talk about Asara B'Tevet.
But Rabbi, this is all well and good, but we can't actually see the walls here. And if we're still unsure that this is even where the wall was, where do we get to see the real deal?
Okay, here we go again. Even though we are facing the graveyard of Har Zeitim, the Bible and Jewish history come to life here. Cut into the mountain itself are grave rooms, ma'asefot, where the bodies were laid down with a niche to hold the head, and then once the flesh decayed, all of the bones were put together in a common pit. First Temple period burial, not as described in the Mishnah, Second Temple period burial. In the siege of Jerusalem on the 10th of Tevet, and for the next years, there's no doubt that there would have been Babylonian troops on this ridge. In fact, the Gemara talks about defensive walls of Jerusalem in the time of the First Temple stretching out onto Har Mishcha, onto the Mount of Olives. So the siege has to begin in this area. We have the valley down below. Under modern buildings is the spring, the Gihon spring, site of the anointing of King Solomon of Shlomo HaMelech. There is white corrugated metal under a current excavation, and just in front of it, close to us and down below, are powerful city walls from the time of the Canaanites. And then those walls were used also in the time of the First Temple. The City of David National Park is in front of us. You have to imagine powerful fortifications along this entire length, all being besieged by the Babylonians. Under this building, which is part of the United Nations Relief War Agency, UNRWA, in the 1800s, ancient walls were found that Professor Eilat Mazar and Charles Warren himself connect to the early fortifications. Let us go now to the foot of the southern wall, where we can clearly see the fortifications that the Babylonians besieged. We're looking at Har HaBayit at the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the walls that the Ottomans put on top of earlier walls and closed off the old city of Jerusalem as we know it. This old city wall is actually bisecting Herod's southern wall, the Kotel Dromi, the Kotel Dromi of the Temple Mount. And there's a staircase there from the time of the Second Temple. And we look here towards ancient gates from the time of the Second Temple until the end of the Eastern Wall. So that's Herodian 2,000 years ago. But right here, right off the road where everybody is driving, are walls of the city of Jerusalem, of the fortifications of Jerusalem, and actually all the cars are driving on the 1,500-year-old wall that is sitting on top of a wall from the time of the temple. Now the fortifications here are clearly from the time of the temple. According to Professor Eilat Mazar of the Hebrew University, we are looking at walls built by King Solomon, by Shlomo HaMelech, and mentioned in the Book of Kings. According to Professor Israel Finkelstein of Tel Aviv University and others, it's later by 2 centuries. But everybody agrees it's from the time of the First Temple, and a piece of clay stamped with Chizkiyahu, son of Achaz, king of Yehuda, was found in a room part of these fortifications. But here, we found evidence of the Babylonian destruction, which is, of course, the break into the walls of the 17th of Tammuz and the destruction of Tisha B'Av. But these walls were besieged from the 10th of Tevet in the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu until the city fell in his 11th year. All this time, Yerushalayim is hemmed in. All this time, as Yecheskel has told us, the pot is cooking, and we didn't respond. So Yecheskel says, Etzem Hayom Hazeh. And the Bnei Yisachar discusses in Maimer 14 of Tevet this halacha that we raised, that if it would come out on Shabbat, just like on Yom Kippur, one would fast. And he suggests this as the source. Rabbi Yochanan says that if Tisha B'Av, if I was there, I would have made it on the 10th, because that's when most of the Heichal was burnt. And the Rabbanan say, right, that why don't we? Mitchalta de Puranita Adifa. The beginning of the destruction is more important. Says the Bnei Yisachar, you see over here in support of the Avudraham's position, that since Asara V'Tevet is the beginning of the end, then comes the breaking of the walls, then comes the destruction of the Mikdash, then comes the aftermath of Gedaliahu and the final end. This is the beginning. You don't move the beginning. It was Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. And Rav Matis Weinberg says, what do we understand? So what? It's a siege. There's no destruction. Yerushalayim is besieged. We are vulnerable. We are vulnerable. Maybe we can lose this over. Maybe it's not invincible. Rabbi Shlomo Riskin met Yitzhak Rabin 2 weeks before he was murdered. And I was at a Kiddush, and Rabbi Riskin was talking to himself, and he said, he thinks he's invincible. Who knew what was about to happen? But there can be a stage where I have all the power behind me, the best army in the world, right? The fortifications, God behind me. I have the temple. So Yirmiyahu said, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Hema. Don't think because my name is on this building it's going to last. Go and see in Shiloh what happened there. I destroyed that, and that's where my name was first. It depends how you act. Asara B'Tevet, the city is besieged. Yerushalayim is besieged. How can that be? It should penetrate you. Yechezkel's talking to the Beit Hameri, the rebellious people. Are you getting it? We didn't get it. We live in times, we're in a very special year when this is being filmed. The corona epidemic, a new strain has just appeared. Airports have again closed. Shuls were closed. The world has changed. We are vulnerable. If we respond being vulnerable, then, I was just trying to talk to you. I was sending you a message. Then the Tzom HaRevi, Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi, and Tzom HaAsiri can turn into days of Sasam B'Simcha. Let us merit that on this Asara B'Tevet.